Have you ever had a moment when you just couldn't pick a game to play? Like your library is packed with titles and you've built a massive backlog with 100 entries or more, and yet nothing appeals to you. You just don't want to play anything. In some way, this is a result of constant information overload. Endless new releases, tons of news, trailers, and on top of that, dozens of YouTube videos you simply can't keep up with. But then there are times when it's not even about keeping up. You just don't want anything. It really doesn't matter if it's old video games or something fresh. Nothing feels interesting. You come home early from work or school, you even carved out an extra hour or two for gaming, but this apathetic state creeps in before you even sit down at the computer or console. The very act of playing turns into a chore, something that feels like a 9-to-5 job. And of course, everyday life is already more than enough to drain most adults. Older players have kids, have workloads, responsibilities. There are plenty of reasons and factors why you might not want to play games, or watch a series, or do any other hobby you once loved. It would be unfair to just write it all off as some mythical apathy that sometimes pops up in our lives. But for the sake of clarity, in this video we're going to focus specifically on the causes of this condition, regardless of external stress factors, and try to look for ways to deal with this problem. Now, this isn't a new topic. Tons of creators have already made videos on it, and it's always popular. But what surprises me is that almost all of these video essays avoid checking actual research. And here's the interesting part. There really is a medical definition for this apathetic state. It's called anhedonia. By definition, anhedonia is the inability to experience pleasure from activities you used to enjoy. That could be physical exercise, singing, video games, watching a series, social interactions. Some people even lose interest in food as a source of joy. Anhedonia is classified as one of the symptoms of depressive disorders or other mental conditions, which means that this seemingly ordinary apathetic state can actually point to much deeper issues. And let me make this clear. I am not in any way encouraging or approving self-diagnosis or self-treatment. If this video makes you reflect on your own health, your first step should always be consulting a doctor. With that being said, I found quite a few studies that looked for correlations between video games and this disorder. What's really fascinating that traits of anhedonia, behavioral disorders, excessive shyness and weak social connections were linked to gaming, but mostly among older players. Kids were far less vulnerable to such issues, something confirmed by people's experiences once they passed their 20s. Think back to how much we loved video games in the 90s or 2000s. And no, it's not just the cliché of back then there were no microtransactions or games used to be better in our time. From what I've seen, today's kids enjoy Fortnite just as much as we once enjoyed our games back in the day. It's more or less in the realm of understanding the causes behind such a disorder. And most often, in specialized research, I came across the idea of the player reward system. Some even call it dopamine overload. What does that mean? Researchers often point to what's called internet gaming disorder, which is classified as a type of behavioral addiction. According to them, one of its key features is that excessive use of the object of addiction, in our case video games, reduces the sensitivity of the brain's reward system to everyday stimuli. They believe this happens through signals expressed as dopaminergic reward prediction errors. For their research, they used data from functional MRI scans of 45 people with this disorder and 42 healthy controls, while performing certain tasks. So, if we translate this into human language, what does it mean? Practically all video games are built on the principle of problem, solution, reward. Completed a quest? Get experience points. Defeated a boss? Here's a shiny new armor set. And so, after a certain period of stimulation, the brain simply gets overloaded with dopamine. The thing is, I couldn't find clear data on what the healthy limits of such rewarding actually are, nor how different stimuli overlap. How many hours a day can you spend playing games? How many hours can you watch TV series on Netflix? How much time is okay to scroll social media? How much can you indulge in these things before you get caught in the dopamine trap and overload yourself? Overall, researchers compare internet gaming disorder with drug use, which also stimulates our brain. But it's also clear that most of these studies start from the point playing video games equals bad, so they often ignore other stimuli. From my own completely unproven perspective, I'd say anhedonia arises from a combination of factors, not just brain overstimulation. Accumulated stress, other possible disorders, health issues like chronic sleep deprivation, but again, I can back this up with hard evidence. For the sake of clarity in this video, let's stick to the topic of dopamine overload and how to deal with it. Apart from psychotherapy and medical treatment, we do have some other options to improve the course of this state. If we step away from the video games for a moment, one of these solutions is a set of activities I'll group under the phrase "eat an apple." The traditional methods doctors usually recommend. First of all, physical activity. Walks, jogging, lifting weights at the gym, playing basketball, tennis, or any other sport you like. I think it's no secret to anyone that physical exercise benefits not only the body, but also the brain, boosting your mood. You should also pay attention to your diet. If you can, it's worth adding fruits, vegetables, and omega-3 fatty acids to your meals. And also you can reinforce all of this with social activity, like meeting friends or a family evening with board games. Studies show that positive interaction with other people reduces stress and anxiety, improves emotional well-being, and boosts self-esteem. I once made a video about loneliness in the context of video games, where I shared some interesting data. Feel free to check it out to see for yourself just how important social connections are. Now let's get back to our video games. The most traditional advice when facing anhedonia is usually to try something new. Mostly play shooters. Try an RPG. Usually only dive into big budget titles. Check out the indie scene. These smaller projects can really surprise you with unusual approaches and unique ideas. Love playing online multiplayer games? Maybe switch to single-player titles, or the other way around. Another option is to find a Discord server where you can meet like-minded people or partners for co-op modes, something that also helps address the social aspect. Mostly play new releases. Why not try older, more classic games? As people like to say now, retro games. Do you usually play for achievements? Drop this idealistic agenda and just enjoy the title. Hop on a horse in Red Dead Redemption 2 and simply enjoy the view. And the reverse works too. Never chased achievements before? Pick a game and go for 100% completion. Do all the challenges, collect every weapon, armor set, horse, car, guitar, piano. Push yourself to focus on a single goal. Or if collecting isn't your thing, invent a special way to play. Don't level up your character, avoid jumping entirely, disable some mechanic, restart the game every time you take damage, very relevant for the Dark Souls series. Try speedrunning or dive into mods. In short, try something new, something you've either never done, always avoided, or just didn't want to do before. It doesn't matter if it's a new genre or a different approach. This kind of experiment can completely flip your perception of what might otherwise feel like a repetitive, boring routine. Another way to find enjoyment again without forcing yourself is to do the opposite. Instead of trying something new, return to your tried and true favorite games that you've played for years. You can even turn it into a kind of tradition. For example, my favorite game is Max Payne 3. Since its release, I've beaten it around 10 times, maybe even more. The third time through, I asked myself, how normal is it really to happily replay the same linear shooter for the 10th time? But going back to this game gives me a kind of peace. It's hard to put into words, but replaying a favorite title brings positive feelings and emotions you can't just find in other games. Another personal example, real-time strategies. Back in my childhood, that was my favorite genre, largely because my parents bought me weaker PCs and RTS games were less demanding on hardware. Thanks to that, I spent literally hundreds of hours on them. At some point, point I got sick of this genre and moved more toward shooters, action games and RPGs. But after a couple of years, I naturally returned to what I know best. And that reignited my love for RTS games. After such long break, it felt amazing to revisit those familiar worlds. So if you once had favorite titles that you haven't touched since childhood, I highly recommend you trying them again. Who knows, maybe nostalgia itself will help you overcome your apathy or even possible Anhedonia. Another more strict piece of advice is simply to take a break. Step away and distract yourself with something else. Maybe your mental state truly needs rest, and no tricks with shifting attention are going to help you. For example, you could switch to something more important that requires your focus. That might be your job. That might be a term paper you haven't touched in weeks. It could be even a household task, like painting a room in your apartment, or maybe you've always wanted to check out some dining place in your city or visit the local museum. You never had the time before, but now you do. And if you don't have the will or concentration even for that, you can switch into what I'd call passive mode. Cut all potential stimuli from your life for a while. Turn off your phone, forget about social media for a few days, ignore your favorite shows, don't play video games. Just do your typical everyday tasks for a few days, a week, maybe longer, especially if we imagine your depressive state slipping into something chronic. Go to bed early, eat healthy food, put in your regular workday. It won't make things worse, that's for sure, because I've already heard plenty of stories from people I know who do this kind of detox from time to time. Honestly, maybe it's something worth doing even without symptoms of anhedonia, simply as a way to improve your mental state. To be honest, when I first started working on this video, I had no idea this apathetic state was such a serious problem. I kept telling myself, so what? Sometimes you just don't feel like doing anything, that's normal. But once I actually began reading medical documents and really digging into the topic, it hit me almost instantly. Human psychology doesn't work on randomness. Something always leads to something else. There's always a cause and an effect. In everyday life we throw around phrases like dopamine overload or talk about the harm of social media, but very rarely do people actually sit down to analyze their own behavior or simply their own mental state. Even myself didn't understand why I sometimes sat there staring at the monitor for hours, unable to pick a single game to play, even though my backlog had dozens, maybe even hundreds of titles. At first I wanted this video to be just a light video essay, but it became something more. At the very least, now I understand some of my own issues better. At the same time, I want my viewers to pay attention to this aspect too. As it turns out, the topic is actually very serious and very important. And once again, I am not encouraging self-treatment or self-diagnosis. If you feel a heavy weight on your mental state, it's always better to see a professional so you don't harm yourself. I hope this video would be useful and maybe it will spark some reflection, or at the very least, allow someone to enjoy their favorite video games, series, or just activities again.